We are Paige
and Ashlyn,
mother
and daughter,
best friends,
and business partners. For the last 14 years, we have been dedicated to the pursuit of learning how to vibrantly thrive body, mind, and spirit every day.
We always knew there was something more to life than the challenges that kept finding us.
So we asked the wise to understand the hidden messages, and we became wise, W-I-S-E.
We leaned into the maybes of different possibilities to solve life's challenges.
We made living the words "Love Ignites Peace" our lifestyle and transformed our personal vibes, our frequencies, into the vibrant, abundant, joyful, living life to the fullest kind of gals we are today. We literally got our freak, aka frequency, on.
Take a dip into self-exploration, soak in the wisdom of your journey, and be sure to pour yourself a big glass of open-mindedness as the water warms and the candle of your inner light begins to shine.
It's time to get your freak on.
Welcome to Bathtub Chats.
Welcome to another Out of the Tub Bathtub Chat. In today's conversation with intuitive leadership coach Fran Gallaher, we are going to explore your relationship with money from the perspective of how you value yourself. However, in our American culture, we often tie our own value to the amount of money that we possess or we don't possess. Jobs like being a teacher, a nurse, a stay-at-home mom monetarily are not valued for the value that they bring to people's lives. But the value that those individuals may feel for doing these most important jobs that really impact other people's lives, may supersede how they are monetarily being valued.
Value is a very personal and subjective measurement that only you can answer for yourself. How you value yourself affects how you interact with the energy of money. Honestly, it has been an interesting week for me as we put this podcast together, because it really got me questioning myself about how I truly valued myself. And what I found surprised me and pushed me to make some serious changes in those very self-limiting beliefs.
The conversation with our guest today, Fran, will help you see inside your own self-beliefs about how you value yourself. In Fran's job as an intuitive leadership coach, she helps people create connection within themselves to make purpose-driven choices with clarity and ease.
Welcome, Fran. We're so excited to have this conversation with you.
Hello, Paige. Hello, Ashlyn. And hello to your viewers and listeners.
Thank you. In a conversation that you and I recently had, you said to me, "You are value." Can you explain to our listeners what you meant by that?
So in some traditions, there is this idea that we have an essential self. And as part of this essential self or essential beingness, we have intrinsic or essential value. In other words, we have value simply for existing. This does not get reflected in our society's beliefs, however. So we kind of have to work on this concept for ourselves to heal our own experience of value, because society, it ain't going to help us on this one.
No, in fact, they've only been hurting us on this one for, I don't know, thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah, one of the ways that this showed up in our country's history or in Western world history is that when colonizers would come to a continent, whether it was North America, South America, Australia, or wherever, they would encounter indigenous people. And these colonizers, they were largely European, they would give a job to an indigenous person, as if this was some beneficent gesture. And then the indigenous person might actually walk away from the job. In Australia, they might go walkabout, for instance. And the Europeans felt like these indigenous people were scoffing at the value that the Europeans were giving them. But that wasn't it at all. It was that the indigenous people had grown up in a culture that valued them for being alive, for being part of the culture, part of a tribe or family or group. And they didn't need, other than what they did on an everyday basis, they didn't have to prove their value. So the Europeans wanted to give them value by giving them a job and money, and this did not compute with the indigenous person.
I love what you said about they didn't have to prove their value, because our culture is, we are bombarded constantly by the idea that we have to prove our value. And one of my big things that I had to overcome, not in regards to what I learned about myself this week, but one of the things that I had to overcome was I'm not enough. And if you're not enough, obviously you aren't valuing yourself.
Right. And another concept that comes from my study of spirituality is that the ego actually is not enough. So the truth is that the ego, the adult functional self, is not enough. So that's where we cultivate our experience with beingness and the resources that come from being present in the moment. These resources can arise within us. We can't just prove that we have these resources. We have to be in the moment and contributing from a place of actually vast resources. Again, that place of beingness.
So how does someone determine their value? How does someone find their value? How do you create your value?
Well, you don't actually create your value. As you get in touch with yourself and you explore beingness, one of the things that might happen is that you may encounter the concept that you don't have any value. You look inside, feel inside, sense inside, and you find maybe that you are bereft of value. So what do you do when you look in the refrigerator and you are almost out of milk or you are out of milk? You don't fall apart at the seams and fall to the floor bereft. You say, better go to the store. And so you go to the store and you buy your milk. Well, if you look inside, feel inside, experience your own inner being, and you discover that you don't have enough of a sense of value, be with that. And it might arise, peak, and dissipate, and then leave behind for you the experience of what is called essential value, your own intrinsic value. Another way to say this is that we have to sort of make our way through the cultural norms that say maybe because you have had false value. I have a fortune, and so therefore I'm valuable. Well, you might experience your inner world, look around, feel around, sense around, and discover there ain't no value inside. So that doesn't, we need to experience our value almost as an act of faith.
What does having this value inside, Fran, what would that look like and feel like to someone?
It can literally look like you find gold or silver on the inside of you. It can feel like you are wealthy, that you are highly resourced. And that feeling can be in your body regardless of your bank balance.
That's beautiful.
How does the value that someone puts on themselves actually determine what they can manifest in their life or what their relationship with money is?
Man, that's a question that I live almost every day, Paige. Sometimes we have to have some convincing that we do indeed experience value. And there might be a situation where we don't experience our value. Many years ago, I knew a woman who had a friend who filled out a job application and they said, "What was your former job?" And she wrote down houseworm. And sometimes we devalue ourselves, as you said at the beginning of this podcast. We devalue ourselves sometimes because of the role we have played. And then we think we have to go outside ourselves and choose some big fancy role that is going to confer value on us. Well, that could happen, but it may be false value. We have to internalize our experience of value.
This is probably a good place to tell my story this week because it kind of goes along with the houseworm, kind of, sort of. But as I was putting together the questions for this podcast, I really started thinking, do I value myself? And what immediately popped into my mind was I could even hear myself saying these words not that many years ago. I mean, maybe 10 years ago. I don't have any special skill sets. There's nothing that makes me special. I'm very mediocre. I'm just average. And in that moment, I thought, oh my good golly. What I'm saying is I don't value the gifts that I was innately given to bring out into the world. I'm not saying I'm something special.
Right.
But when I was saying that I was mediocre, that I don't have any special skill sets, I was actually devaluing what I do have and what I can bring into the world. And I was telling Ashlyn, if I don't value myself, how can other people value me?
Right.
It's like a cause and effect kind of thing. If I don't value myself, how can someone else actually feel that I have value?
Right. And sometimes we have to behave as if. We have to come at this from that as if place. But it's helpful to know whether we actually experience value within ourselves or we don't. Again, it's this metaphor of discovering that we are low on milk. So if you find, or your listeners find, that you don't value yourself, wow, be with that. What's it like to discover? Many years ago, I went through a really difficult time. And when I meditated, I discovered that I was somehow in my inner world walking around inside of a crater on the moon. There was nothing there for me. There was nothing there. And I ended up realizing that I was bereft of compassion. And I had always thought that I was a compassionate person. I was, but I was compassionate for little puppies and little children and little kittens and that elderly person down the street, but I did not have compassion for myself. And with each of these hurdles, we can discover we don't have compassion for ourselves. We don't have value for ourselves. We don't have love for ourselves. And we may have to explore the lack before we can experience the fullness.
So going back to the question of how does the value that someone puts on themselves determine what they can create and manifest in their lives? What I'm hearing from both you, Fran, and my mom is that it creates a either limitation because you don't value yourself, so you're not asking for that same value back from the world. So you're not manifesting or allowing yourself to be in a place of receiving that value or all of those different things. And then on the flip side, if you do feel the value, you hold your line, you stay grounded and committed to making sure you are receiving what you deserve because of how you value yourself. Is that correct?
I'm with you on everything except the word deserve.
Okay.
I'm not big on the concept of deserving because as long as a 3-year-old can get leukemia, for instance, this world has nothing to do with deserving as far as I can tell. So I kind of leave that out of the equation. But I was with you on everything else that, right now, I feel like, how do I say this? I've been, because I'm a woman, because I stayed home and took care of my children for part of my life, because of various things, I may not have the accrued financial value that someone who has had a career their whole adult life might have. And so I might rail against our society, saying that our society does not value me. May I curse?
Sure, yes.
But fuck that. It's more like, okay, don't rail against society. Apparently, I have some challenges about valuing myself because I haven't just spent most of my adult life in my career. The other day I did a TikTok video because you can find me on TikTok, guys. And it was I was having a a difficult day and I had hit a low spot. And then I remembered my own little metaphor that I've used over the years. And I imagine, I don't even know if this is a real rodeo event, but I imagine this female trick rider on this wonderful horse. And she rides into an arena and she drops her handkerchief. And then she gallops around the arena and she bends down off of the galloping horse and picks the handkerchief off of the ground. And so right now I feel like I have to bend down and accept the self of me that doesn't always experience value, and bring her in. And let's work on this together to experience our own value.
So what does it look like when you do value yourself in what you can create in your life?
You set healthy boundaries. You don't do just anything for anyone for any reward. You start to have priorities. You make choices about what matches your value as well as your inner value. You know, there comes a time when, when I was younger and I was home, it was easier to do certain things to assist people in my world, bring a casserole to a friend or whatever it might be. But that isn't a fit for me now in my role now. I have to set boundaries with myself about what I say yes to. So I think that we get caught up in the idea of boundaries as a rejection, but boundaries are also an acceptance. What do I let in? What am I in alignment with in this stage in my life?
I love that it's also an acceptance. It's not just a rejection. I think that is like so mic drop worthy.
Thank you, Ash.
Well, it puts it in such a positive, healthy perspective. Whereas I think sometimes the boundary of like, I'm rejecting this, it feels heavy or it feels yucky or you feel guilty about it. And it's like, wait, maybe a boundary is just saying, hey, what am I going to let in? Oh, that feels good. It's just a different perspective shift. And as we shift our perspective, it makes a world of difference.
Right. And sometimes we think that boundaries mean that we have to become this badass person. I don't think so. Boundaries are simply being comfortable. What I teach is that we need to be ready to say yes, no, or I'll get back to you. But we can't do it in a vacuum. We have to allow that for others. So we have to practice saying yes, no, or I'll get back to you. Can I tell a story?
Yes.
Sure.
So when I first married, and I'm no longer married, but when I first married, my husband and I had nothing. And so as we began to have a few more resources, a friend said that Paul Simon was coming to Red Rocks, and me and 3 other women, we made this big plan to go to Red Rocks to a Paul Simon concert. And while I'm there, there was a man with a woman and 2 children who came partway after the concert started. He was down at the end of the aisle, and the woman had a big eye patch on. And he came down the aisle, and for some reason he came straight to me with a young child he was carrying in his arms. And he yelled, over the sound of the music, "Will you watch my baby?" And I looked at him and I thought about all I had gone through to come to this concert, because I left out how I had gotten a babysitter. I had done all this stuff. And I looked at him, it's like, no, I'm not this portable houseworm who takes any baby that anyone shoves at me. Well, he called me a bitch.
Aww.
And he took his baby down the aisle and started telling everyone, that woman down there won't watch my baby. And people were turning to stare at me like I was this horrible person. And he found some other person who took this baby from him. And it just about slayed me. I was shaking. It was horrifying to me because I was the sort of person who valued helping other people. But I wasn't going to just take care of a stranger's baby. And that was the first time that I set a boundary about, no, this is my evening. This is my experience. But in any case, apparently my soul brought that whole situation to me for me to clarify, who am I? What am I about? And I have value as a person who can go to a concert without also having to take care of someone's baby.
Well, I think you bring up an excellent point as we're talking about value here. It's this alignment of the value you feel inside being aligned with what you value in the world, what you value externally. And so it's really important to be able to create that alignment in order for you to have peace, to respect yourself, and to create what it is you want to create in this world.
Absolutely. And I love that about the peace, because I got to tell you, the road to peace has been a bumpy one for me, because I would love, to take care of a baby who needs to be taken care of when it's appropriate. I took care of my babies. I took care of my babies, and I took care of other people's babies. And that was a choice I made. I'm good at taking care of babies, but not now, thanks.
I think we can extrapolate this to relationships as well. It's easier to say that, not to say it was easy to tell the man, no, I won't be holding your baby at this concert, but it's hardest to say yes, no, or I'll get back to you to someone that you're afraid to disappoint. So could you elaborate at all on your value, holding that value, keeping that value, especially in those really close relationships?
Yeah, you're right. It's really tricky. It's tricky because what we have to remember is that I want a sincere yes from a family member. And if they tell me no, that's fine, because I don't want a false yes that leads to resentment from them. So I think that when so many generations back, you wouldn't be able to say no to your mother or your father or whomever you were close with. Now we are starting to get more free to say no to one another. And, one of the things that I really, really try hard to do, and I'm not saying I always manage this, is to say a no with a yes. No, I won't be able to watch your baby right now at this Paul Simon concert, but here's my card. If you would like me to watch your baby next Tuesday, I'll be available, and I'll let you know what my rate is. I mean, I'm making that up, but yeah, how do we do no's that are softer? So again, like I have a group of friends who we do a group text about, can we get together on Sunday? And one of the things that I have to say that I get really annoyed by is when people say, no, that won't work for me, and they leave it at that. It's like, no, that won't work for me, but I could do it the following Sunday. Let's keep the ball rolling, folks.
Right. It's a good solution.
Yeah.
So I love how you also tied in the fact that, yes, I will watch your child another time. Here's my rate. So let's tie this into some money talk. How does how you value yourself determine your relationship with money? And I don't mean valuing yourself because you have money, but the relationship that you create with money based off of how you value yourself.
I think it depends on whether or not we are delivering value with a product or service that we offer to the world. And if we believe in the value we are delivering, it's a lot easier to charge appropriately. Now, it may take some time. We all start out, maybe not everyone, but some of us, I've certainly started out by offering things for very low cost, some of my services, and I just thought of another story. So I started out as an intuitive, And another word for what I was or what I was doing was a psychic, and I was providing psychic information or psychic readings. And I was pretty darn accurate, and I would end up with people who were very, very dependent upon me, and it would terrify me. The responsibility was so great. And then I was invited to be a faculty member for something called the Program in Intuition. It was a high-end program designed to teach physicians and business leaders intuition. So I taught the head of the VA, the head of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the head of Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, all kinds of heavy hitters. And I moved into the role of a coach, which made such a big difference for me because it was a shared responsibility. Instead of me being the oracle at the top of the mountain, and you climb up to the top of the mountain and you get the oracle to come out of her cave, and she's going to give you all the answers. Now, I'm still highly intuitive, and I still deliver accurate information. And I hope to make a difference in the world with my intuitive ability. But working as a coach means that it can be part of a conversation and a shared responsibility, as I said. But backing up to when I was an intuitive at giving readings, I started out and I had a mentor. Her name was Mame, and she was a psychic. And she said, one day to me, she said, "Okay, honey, you're charging for what you're doing, aren't you? Right?" And I said, "Oh, no." She said, "Okay, that's fine. Then when you give people a reading, they're taking you out to lunch, right?" I said, "No, they're not." She said, "Honey, it has to be energy for energy, or the guides will take your gift away from you." And she said, "If they take you out to lunch, if they give you a reading, then you can give them a reading. But otherwise, honey, you have to start charging." And so it was so difficult because it was a gift that I had. Why not give my gift to others? Sure, yes, you can give your gift to others, but it's about energy for energy.
I love that. I think it's so true. And it really ties into our conversation so often about everything is energy. And how do we want to use our energy and the energy budget that we have, and that exchange keeps the energy flowing versus that constant just giving, just letting, even though you're gifting the energy, it's just pumping out of you. And it's like, it's okay to be an exchange that comes back to you as well. And that's part of you valuing yourself. When you value the energy you're putting out, you value the energy that's worth coming back.
That's very insightful, Ashlyn, and I loved that you made it. You took energy for energy and you turned it into value for value, and the flow of value. And that's the other thing that's interesting. I think money needs to flow just as value needs to flow. In this interview, the three of us, we're sharing value. Nobody is superior. Nobody is posturing. There isn't some hierarchical thing going on. None of us is saying, "Well, I used to believe that." Some kind of very covert, "I'm better than you" nonsense. We're not doing that because we're in flow, the three of us.
And when you have the energy of "I'm better than you," what you are actually doing is stopping the flow.
You're absolutely right, Paige.
So, yeah.
You're no longer receiving. You're longer just saying, "I got it. I don't want what you have."
That's right. 100%.
And this is a great point about money. Wow, what you just said. I got it. Okay, all done. I don't think it works that way.
Yeah, I don't either.
Right.
I've had some interesting experiences over the years just with the idea of possibility. And I didn't value the possibilities that existed out there. And so when you are shutting down the flow, you're shutting down possibility. And possibility is that you have the opportunity to create as much wealth, abundance as you can possibly create. But you have to tap into that's a possibility for you. And that possibility would need to align with your value. Like, is that something you value externally? And is that a possibility within myself internally that I would value?
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to describe the ongoing dialogue, isn't it, with ourselves and the universe?
Yeah, it is.
We read this book called Love Money, Money Loves You by Sarah McCrum. And one piece of the book that she talks about, it's actually a channeled message from the energy of money. She channels from money, saying that what's so important in your exchange of money, moving this conversation away from the value of ourselves to the value of what you're purchasing, sharing, giving, is the amount of money you want to exchange for something. You have to value what you're exchanging it for to the same level that money is at. Does that make sense? So like, if to some people, let's put it in this context, a Louis Vuitton bag to some people does not have the value. They don't care. They don't like how it looks. They wouldn't use it. They don't want it. So they do not value that they want to put $2,500 to that, right? Somebody else really values that Louis Vuitton bag, so the value of money matches the value of the bag. What I'm just trying to say is that the exchange of energy does involve value, whether it's your value of yourself or the value of the item or service that you're exchanging. Value does become part of the conversation when you are talking about exchanging money or exchanging a service or a product, exchanging hands,
exchanging energy of any sort. Yeah.
Well, you're talking about the variability of human products and human services. You know, we have to have the need for it. I don't need an obstetrician right now, so I am not going to value the services of an obstetrician. Back to babies, apparently. Yeah, I would love to read that book. Thank you for mentioning it. And could you mention it again?
Yeah, it's called Love Money, Money Loves You. We can send you the link after this, by Sarah McCrum, and we actually interviewed her on the podcast this month as well. And it's just, the book really changed our perspective, not only about money, but just how we show up in aligned action in the world.
It's probably the best book on money I've ever read.
Wow, I can't wait to read it.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many wonderful books about money, and I've read many of them, and I'm still learning about money. I just think that we have to be aware of whether or not, again, back to the very beginning, we have value inside or we do not have value inside. And it's not the end of the world if we do not have it. You know, long ago, I worked with an executive, and I directed this person in a guided visualization to become aware of their heart. And the person went, I don't have a heart. And they were experiencing the fact that they did not have any connection with that emotional center that we call the heart. And over time, they were able to connect with that emotional center. But it took time for them.
Yeah. I think it's very easy for us to assess what we value outside of ourselves. But the real question is, Fran, how does someone really start assessing how they value themselves?
Well, I think there's two ways for that. One is to look at the conditions of our lives and see if those conditions reflect that we are valuing ourselves. The other is to develop our inner senses to perceive our inner world and discover whether there is the experience of value within us.
I love it. So what final parting words, tips, tricks, advice around value, or anything you'd like to impart would you like to leave our audience, our igniters, with?
Wow. Well, I would love to hold someone's hand as they assess their own experience of value, because it can be so scary, especially for women, because we have not been equally valued in our society. And to hold someone's hand as they assess their own relationship with value, and from there, their relationship with money. And, you know, I can assist people with bringing through intuitive information that they may not have. Something about their childhood, for instance, or something about a past life that has skewed their sense of value. You know, the very first time I did a past life regression that I did for myself, someone assisted me. I think it might have been my brother, because we used to do a lot of past life regression stuff. And we used a script, and it said, look down when you land in a past life. Look down at your feet. What are you wearing on your feet? Well, I burst into tears because I was a developmentally delayed child who was so not valued by the society I was in that I didn't have shoes. I wasn't given shoes. And so when I was asked, look at your feet, what do you have on your feet? I had nothing. And I had this sort of like a cotton or linen shift that I wore. And I lived out with the goats and the sheep and slept with them and kept them safe. And so I had only value because I took care of the goats and the sheep. So there's more to that past life experience. But I've had to overcome an experience of not feeling valued in my life. And I can assist others who are finding that that's their experience also.
So how would they find you?
All right. reallyflourish.com is my website. There's not a lot of Fran Gallaher intuitive leadership coaches in the world right now, so you can Google me. I'm on TikTok as Fran Gallaher. I'm on LinkedIn as Fran Gallaher. And again, my website is reallyflourish.com. I offer 30-minute complimentary sessions, and these are actually fun-filled, information-packed sessions. This is not a nice little discussion of what might be. We get down into it. And then if you want, you can work with me on a regular basis. I love assisting people in discovering their value and designing their lives to reflect that value.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you, Fran.
We so appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation with us. We really value the time that we've spent together, and we value you.
We're in sync.
We are in sync.
You are. Thank you both. Thank you so much for valuing my contribution enough to invite me on here. So I appreciate you guys.
Yeah, likewise. Well, with that, we wish you all a great week. And as always, I am sending you love from my heart to yours.
Remember that you are the ignition, and get your freak on. Thank you for listening to the Love Ignites Peace Bathtub Chats podcast. Make sure you subscribe, review, and rate our podcast. And if you really love it, please be sure to share it with all of your friends. For more resources on how to get your freak on, visit our website at loveignitespeace.com. And give us a follow on Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook at Love Ignites Peace. See you next Tuesday.